Hertz, marketing manager here at Warwick Forest. I'm sitting in front of our putting green, where each spring our residents enjoy the annual putting tournament. Today, I'm introducing two ladies who will play an integral part in the Riverside Foundation, Kristen Witt and Faye Petro Gargiulo. Kristen Witt joined Riverside in 2017 as the second only executive director of the Riverside Health System Foundation. Once a grant-making arm of the health system, the Riverside Foundation became a charitable gift destination in 2012, seeking funding and support from the community, business leaders, patients, and their families. Kristen felt a calling to the Riverside Foundation after her father was diagnosed with and battled cancer in 2015. This experience and the gratitude for his care created a new passion in her work. Kristen holds a bachelor's from the Florida State University and master's in nonprofit management from University of Maryland. She lives in Newport News with her husband Brian, daughter Abigail, a large fluffy dog Scooby-Doo, a rescue from the Peninsula SPCA, as well as an Amazon parrot. During Faye's 30-plus year career with the Riverside Health System, her responsibilities focused on dynamic diversification and service development, ranging from wellness endeavors to clinical service lines, marketing, communications, and campus reimagining. Her greatest joys were decades of work in three unique components of Riverside: the Riverside Foundation, the Riverside Medical Group, and research and discovery here at Riverside. Her current focus is her volunteer work on behalf of the Riverside Health System Foundation, the Boys and Girls Club Foundation, and the Newport News Economic and Industrial Development Authority's Marketing Subcommittee. Faye holds a bachelor's degree from Mississippi State University, where she studied business and political science. And in 1990, she completed her master's business administration at the College of William and Mary. Faye enjoys many outdoor activities, such as porch swings, rocking chairs, small groups of friends with extremely diverse interests, some politics, and reading nearly obsessively. Without further ado, here are Kristen Witt and Faye Petro Gargiulo with the Riverside Foundation.
Happy Friday, everybody. Although I hear when you're retired that it doesn't matter if it's Friday. But I'm glad it's Friday, and it's really great to be with you. I'm Kristen Witt, as you heard, and I'm joined by Faye Petro Gargiulo, who is the person that hired me. More on that in a second. You've already heard a little bit about us, but I have to say that Faye had a 30-plus year career with Riverside, has amazing experience here. She is a proud alum of Mississippi State. I promised her I would not get that wrong as a Florida State grad. I never want to hear that I went to University of Florida, so Mississippi State, and then landed here after a lot of experience in other areas and had her MBA from William and Mary, and is here at Riverside, the vice president who hired me, and is now retired, enjoying her life, but back as a Riverside Foundation board member and guiding our work here. We would love to have discussion and chat with you at the end. So we've asked Mackenzie at the end of this, because we have saved that time, to go ahead and allow you to turn on your mics and your cameras and talk with us. Our presentation won't take up the entire slot of time because we'd love to have discussion with you. So thanks for joining us today. Again, I'm Kristen Witt. I have been with Riverside for 3 years. A little bit about me: I am the proud daughter of a police officer and a teacher. I hail from Maryland and landed here in Newport News for my husband, Brian, who is a native to Newport News and really would never want to leave. So if we were going to get married, I was going to have to come down here, which I have loved. And I also consider Christopher Newport University my second alma mater. More on that in a second. I graduated from school and went into criminology, and I worked at the International Association of Chiefs of Police. That's a very long title. IACP is what we call it. And I managed their gun violence programs. As a part of that, I had to raise money from private foundations and grants. And when it came time to move down here for my husband, I was looking for a role, and I was lucky enough to sit down with President Tribble and ask him if there was a place for me at Christopher Newport. And he said, "What would you like to do here?" And I said, "President Tribble, I'd like to do anything but fundraising." And President Tribble called me the next day and said, "How about fundraising?" So I landed at Christopher Newport and spent 8 amazing years there at the time, and got to work with the Lifelong Learning Society and Mackenzie and Jane, and many of you along the way, and it was wonderful. I knew and thought that Christopher Newport was going to be the place for my career for a very, very long time. But you know, things come along in your life and you never know what's going to change. And one summer, I had decided that a change that came my way was the right thing for me. I had left CNU and started what I called my new big job. And 2 weeks into that job, not even 2 weeks into that job, Faye, 1 week into that job, I finished what was a great day. I was feeling really good about where I was, and I walked out to my car and I had a voicemail from Faye saying, "I would like to talk with you about the Riverside Foundation. Would you give me a call?" And I called her and she said, "I understand you just started a new job, but I'd love to talk to you about coming and joining us here at Riverside if that's something that interests you." Little did Faye know that I felt like that was a huge sign. I'm going to back up for a second and tell you why that was. In 2015, I was working setting sail at the Ferguson Center. That's where all of our new students and their parents come for orientation. It was the Friday before, it was the Monday actually after Father's Day. And I received a call from my dad, and he said, "I have some news. I don't want to alarm you, but I wasn't feeling well, and I went to the doctor, and they've rushed me through some procedures once they got my blood work back. I'm heading for some scans. We're not quite sure what's wrong, but I just wanted you and your mother to know that, that some things are up." Within a week, we knew that my dad's abdomen was full of tumors. You know what kind of cancer it was, but you know, the doctors were saying this is walking and talking like lymphoma. And heading into the July 4th weekend, my husband and I packed up my daughter, who was 1.5 at the time, and headed for Delaware for that 4th of July weekend. My dad's biopsy to figure out what sort of cancer he had was scheduled for July 19th. When I think back on that, July 19th seemed forever away for a very scared family. July 2nd to July 19th felt like it would be an eternity. And fortunately or unfortunately, over the weekend of July 4th, my dad's condition deteriorated so much in front of our eyes, which is not typical of cancer, and we had to call an ambulance and have him admitted to the hospital. Very quickly, we found out that his tumors had pierced through his intestines. He was rushed into surgery to find that perforation, and within a few hours, the surgeon came out and called us into a back room and said, "I'm so sorry. These tumors are so vast, they're so big. I can't find that perforation. I have Barry," that's his name, "I have Barry in ICU for you to go visit with him and stay with him. He's going to go into what is called septic shock." Of course, I had no clue what that meant. He said, "He's going to pass away tonight. So we're going to escort you now so you can be with him in his final hours." And as my mom and I walked up to the ICU in complete shock, I said to myself, "This isn't true. He's going to make it. This can't be happening to us." And a medical oncologist came and sat down with us and talked us through what we would be seeing over the next few hours as septic shock set in. And every moment along the way, I just said, this isn't going to happen. He's not going to pass away. He very kindly told me how likely that was not true. He would. And that's when I did the first thing you're not supposed to do in these situations, and I bargained with God a bit. And I said, God, if there is anybody that deserves more time, and isn't it this amazing, wonderful man, give him more time, give us more time. And miraculously, throughout the night, instead of us watching his vitals go down, everything started going up. He did turn around. He came out of everything. And in the morning, he was stable, even with a perforated intestine. And it felt like God had answered my prayers. He had heard me. And the medical oncologist came in, and I'm smiling and saying, he's here. It's the morning. He's here. And he gently again looked at me and said, that's right, but he still has cancer, and he still has a perforated intestine. And he said, Kristen, I want you to imagine this. Your father is right here. He's laying in this bed, and in front of him is a fire, and behind him is a cliff. And so the cancer will kill him. It will kill him. But if we treat the cancer, the chemotherapy will likely kill him as well. Remember, he has a perforated intestine. And he said, so you need to decide, do we send him through the fire, or does he go back off the cliff? And that's when I did the second thing you're probably not supposed to do. And now that I've met many doctors, they sort of knowingly smile and shake their heads when I say this. I said to that doctor, I said, what would you do if this was your parent? And he said, my mother is still alive, and she is a very peaceful woman. She would not want this fight. She would not want to go through this fire. And that's when I looked at him and said, my dad was a police officer. He was a volunteer firefighter. He has run into fires. He has pulled people from burning cars. He runs towards the gunshots, not away. And so send him through the fire. And we did. We hooked him up to chemotherapy that day, and he made it again. And that started a 143-day stay at BB Medical Center in Delaware. My father was there from July to November. I went up every single weekend except family weekend and homecoming. Many of you know how big that is at Christopher Newport. And we got to know his doctor, Dr. Spellman, and his medical oncologist and his nurses. And along the way, they took care of his body, but they also took care of his soul and his spirit. And by the way, mine too. And I could never say thank you enough for the hope that they gave us during that time. So during those 5 months, my dad received chemo every 3 weeks. And then 7 to 10 days during those chemo treatments, many of you know, if you've experienced this or had loved ones around you, there are times in chemo treatments that your immunity drops, you have problems. Reminder, he still has a perforated intestine. And so every time he had chemo, we almost lost him. During those 5 months, at least 7 times, Brian and I were called up and said, please stop everything now and come up here. Your dad might not make it through the night. But he did all of those times. And we got to November, and all of those tumors had shrunk. And we took him down for scans, and they could finally find that perforation. He had been in a bed for 130 some days. He hadn't eaten since July. He was just getting TPN, and they finally found it. And Dr. Spellman said to us, now is the time. We're going to go in a couple of weeks. We're going to fix that perforation, and then we're going to get him strong. This was a huge moment for us. And we were so thrilled, but also so scared because his body was very weak, and we knew the surgery would be tough. So the surgery was scheduled for the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And the weekend before, as I was packing my bags to go up there for the week and to be with him at this really amazing time where we could close out this chapter, my mother and Dr. Spellman called me, and it was on a Saturday. And they said, we have some really challenging news. Your dad was confused yesterday. He said some things that were alarming to us. He didn't know his nurse. We sent him down for scans, and just in these few weeks off of chemo, the cancer has come back and it has spread to his brain. And I, of course, said, well, then what do we do next? chemotherapy. He's already done this, chemotherapy. And Dr. Spellman said, Kristen, he would not survive a surgery, and it's still going to come back. This is the place where we have to say he has fought the good fight, and we have to let him go peacefully now. And I drove up, and we talked with Dr. Spellman, and we talked with my dad and told him that he wasn't going to make it. And he just smiled and said, I've been so grateful for the time I've had. And he came home to hospice in our house there in Delaware the Monday before Thanksgiving, and he passed away the day after Thanksgiving. And what I know for sure is that I received 5 more months with my dad than I really was supposed to. He was supposed to die back in July, and because of the talent and skill of his doctors and nurses, I received more time with him. And while his suffering does haunt me, I know he would have chosen that fight over and over and over for that chance and for that time with his family. And I would walk to the ends of the earth for Dr. Spellman. So when Faye called and said, would you like to come join the Riverside Foundation? Here is what we do. And by the way, we raise money for oncology and oncology patients and their families. I had to pull over because I felt like this was my dad saying, this is the right place for you. And so I joined the Riverside Foundation and have never looked back. And I'm so grateful to do this work with families just like mine. It's really an honor and a privilege. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Faye Gargiulo.
Kristen tells you that story as part of context setting, and there's going to be a bit more of that. I think now we are going to begin our slides. Mackenzie, I think you're in charge of that. Moving forward to the next slide, I want to begin to define some terms. One of the things that can be a little confusing during a talk such as this is about which Riverside are we speaking? One more slide, Mackenzie, because many people, and many of you I'm certain that are listening, are fully aware of the fact that Riverside has been in this community for a long, long time. That's true. So long that, quite candidly, we're a little schizophrenic about our birthday. On the slide you see 1915, that may not be totally accurate. We received all of the paperwork from the community around 1911. To get things started, 1914, we began to educate nurses. Ironically, that was our first step. The first entity that had the name of the Newport News Non-Sectarian Hospital was the nursing school. And then in 1915, we began with the hospital. So more than 100 years, quite candidly, around 2015, we celebrated for 2 years, just to be sure that we covered all of those occasions. And then in 1999, it became clear that there was the need for a foundation that would help support this Riverside entity. That foundation has evolved some, and we will speak to that in a moment. But I think by the end of today, you'll understand why that foundation, as part of literally the pillar of support for the Riverside health system, is necessary. And let me make it clear, you are not going to be hearing just about Riverside today. We simply know this system the best. We will use this system to illustrate why the financial structures of American healthcare now make philanthropic gifting almost a requirement for healthcare as we know it to continue. Mackenzie, go ahead with the video.
In 1872, Collis Huntington expanded the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway, establishing the foundation for commerce and growth on the peninsula, eventually contributing to the creation of Newport News Shipbuilding and the first Riverside Hospital.
Need became clear to have hospital facilities for the workers and their families. There was a doctor in town, S.W. Hobson. Mr. Post was president of the shipyard at the time. They got together and decided to build a hospital, and they started raising money to do that.
They were also instrumental in helping us move to the new location.
In 1960, Newport News Shipbuilding and their employees were cornerstone donors to our community campaign to build a new hospital.
Riverside got the shipyard to allow workers to do a payroll deduction to contribute to the construction of the hospital. But it also gave a buy-in to the shipyard workers who really thought they owned the hospital.
From those shared roots more than a century ago, Newport News Shipbuilding remains a valued partner in helping Riverside provide remarkable care on the peninsula. Ruby Pope Drum was a 1948 graduate of the Riverside School of Professional Nursing.
From 20 plus years in the Air Force, she never forgot the training that she received at Riverside.
When she passed away, she made a significant, our largest donation ever to Riverside. So we're incredibly thankful to her and her legacy.
The Ruby Pope Drum Annual Scholarship has provided over $600,000 in educational assistance to more than 300 aspiring nurses.
We received the word from Bob and Susan McCreary that they were going to fund and support the development of the Abernathy Gardens.
The Abernathy Gardens, alongside historic Causey's Mill, was created to honor Susan's parents, George and Estelle Abernathy. Estelle was a nationally known herbalist with a legacy of volunteerism.
Susan's father, who had been a community leader, he had been an official at the shipyard, as well as the previous mayor of the city of Warwick.
The Abernathy Gardens will remain a treasured resource for visitors to the hospital for years to come. The Lawson family and W.M. Jordan Company have been part of Riverside's story for over 60 years.
We've had a long-standing relationship with Riverside. So I've heard stories from Bob Lawson, John Lawson's dad. We would have a pile driving operation going on, and the doctors would be performing operations inside. And so we would have to stop driving piles so that they could do their operation. And then when they finished, we would start driving piles again.
Dr. Jack Lawson served as chief of surgery and as a permanent member of the board of directors at Riverside Hospital. He believed Riverside was the key to excellent health care for the people of the peninsula and leaves a lasting legacy of leadership and excellence. And Dr. Bland Lawson built a reputation as an innovative leading trauma surgeon in our community.
And one of those bases for a strong community is a health system that supports the health of the community.
John Lawson has been very active in the community. He has always believed in giving back to those that give to us.
A native of Newport News, John Lawson is an inspiring leader who cherishes his family, cares deeply for his employees, and his hometown.
John Lawson just believes in giving to his community. He believes strongly in this community. He loves where he lives. He wants to make Newport News and Riverside Regional as successful as they can be.
W.M. Jordan continues as a partner today in helping us build and elevate healthcare in our community.
We're very, very proud to be a partner and have the support of W.M. Jordan.
A unique collaboration between W.M. Jordan Company, the Riverside Foundation, and Golden Bethune-Hill helped to establish the Newport News Free Clinic, increasing much-needed access to care for residents of Southeast Newport News.
For those who really know her, they know that she, you can feel it. You can, if you're near her, you can feel how caring she is, and she doesn't hesitate to express that.
She's class act. I got to work with her when she was the administrator at Riverside Regional.
It's people like Golden and Charlie who make Riverside better, who make our community better.
Charlie and Golden, as an extraordinary gesture, directed gifts made in celebration of their wedding to Riverside Cancer Care. The generosity made in memory of Vernon Bethune helped create peaceful and reflective surroundings for cancer patients and families in the hospital.
Jimmy decided it was he thought he needed to do something to kind of return the favor, so to speak, on the great care that both his parents received regarding their cancer.
Jimmy and family have experienced the cancer journey, as their parents Tommy and Virginia Bain were both cared for by Riverside.
We're very blessed to have Jimmy as well as other individuals in this community to step up and do that. It speaks volumes as far as what we can do outside of a reimbursement model to give this care that's not only needed for the patient itself, but also for the family.
Their continued and generous support allows Riverside to care for our patients and their families as we would care for those we love.
So you've heard a little bit about gratitude, you've heard a little bit about history. Let's jump now into the real reason for today's conversation, which is why are we so dependent on that? And in this sense, I'm using the word we to mean something far broader than Riverside. Many years ago, someone I love and respect introduced a quote to me, and it's really become fundamental to my thinking. And that quote was that dialogue without definition is not communication. Never has that been more true than today in many arenas where people tend to use very broad brush comments and words such as all or never or always to describe things, sometimes in a real effort to divide. So let me drill down for a few minutes on about what I am speaking when it comes to the philanthropic support of healthcare. First of all, today, I'm going to use the phrase healthcare industry to really mean the healthcare delivery system. Those places where physicians and buildings and spaces and services come together to actually produce and provide healthcare. I am intentionally not going to speak about pharma. I'm not pharmaceutical industry. I am intentionally not going to speak about the insurance industry very much. Each deserves an entire conversation, and I'm always very glad to have that conversation if anyone's interested. But for the most part, those two segments of American healthcare are doing just fine as it relates to profitability, money production, margins, etc. I instead am going to focus on healthcare delivery. A side note, I'm also not going to be speaking about those delivery sites that are super specialized, where it is maybe an operational center, an OR that is only dedicated to one specialty or one group. Or I'm not going to be speaking about those things that have found a very good place for themselves in delivery. I'm speaking about those integrated delivery sites that most importantly include two bookends that many of you have become very familiar with this year during the pandemic. And those bookends are the emergency medicine team and the intensive care unit. Quite candidly, in healthcare, many deliverers think of those as big burdens. They're very expensive to maintain. But I proudly want to focus on the groups, the teams. I typically think of the 7 sisters. Within the Commonwealth of Virginia, they're pretty easy to identify. They're ANOVA, a large system up in the northern part of the state. Carilion over to our west. MCV, UVA, very well-known academic centers that also provide a lot of community support. Bon Secours, Centera, of course, and Riverside. I will side note, Centera is a little bit of a different structure because Centera has indeed built itself now around an insurance model, a very, very wise thing to do in terms of financial support. But for the most part, those 7 sisters are the kinds of delivery sites that you don't only find here in Virginia, but that you can find all across the country. And it is really about them that I'm speaking. Now, when I start a conversation about these integrated delivery systems that combine doctors, their clinical skill, their guidance, as well as the sites of service and the services themselves, very quickly someone in the room raises their hands and says, Oh, come on, Faye. Don't they make plenty of money? I mean, after all, it's the aging of the population that has generated the volume, and with that volume, aren't those places making a ton? Well, again, let me side note for clarity and so that we are certain we're having dialogue with definition. First of all, just a quick reminder, I'm certain that most of you know this, but a not-for-profit is so designated because every dollar that is earned must be plowed back into its mission or its cause, right? Nothing's going out in a dividend check. We're not checking what our stock market performance is in order to be sure that we are fiscally judged and that our stockholders are being amply rewarded. Not-for-profit does not mean do not make more than you spend. As a matter of fact, thousands of hospitals around this country in the last several years have closed because they were unable to make more money than they spent. But how much more? Mackenzie, flip to the next slide for a moment. I love this reverse math. It just helps clarify so many things. Quite candidly, the world of healthcare delivery, in a really good year, you might make 4.5%. Most of us live in the 3 to 3.5% range. And again, I'm talking about those delivery systems that are not being paid by an insurance basis, based on an insurance company at the core of their business. So those of us who really specialize in delivering care, let's just use 3.5% as an example. At 3.5%, you have to have actually collected about $28,500 in order to take $1,000 for reinvestment to the bottom line. Now, I used an important term there. You actually must have collected. And I renewed my insight on this research just over the course of the last few weeks getting ready for this conversation. In 2010, the most recent data I could find, when given a list of 10 bills that they must pay or intended to pay, a large sample, large meaning several thousand individuals, acknowledged that out of the 10 bills they were likely to face, that actually paying for care that had been delivered to them ranked 8th on their intentions. Now, in a minute, this will become important because ranked 3rd or 4th was the fact they did intend to continue to pay their insurance premium. What was ranked highest? Mortgage. Next highest, certain utilities. The only two things that health care bills ranked above was some forms of entertainment, and then that big all grouping area called other. So collecting health care bills is something that we do not take for granted, nor should we. But $28,500 of collected dollars is what generates roughly $1,000 for an organization like Cetera, Riverside, Bon Secours, and Nova Carilion to put back into purchasing new equipment, making sure we can find and hire the finest physicians, clerical staff, team members of all ilk. Now, I'm using that 3.5% because that's what it was like pre-COVID. Quite candidly, these days, after this last year, most delivery systems are doing quite well if, even with the help from the government recovery acts, if we're making 1%. And the math there is easy. It takes $100,000 of collected payment in order to generate $1,000 that can go back into renewal, refreshment, rebuilding, purchasing new technology, etc. Now compare that to a donated gift where $1,000 contributed goes straight to $1,000 that can be reinvested. And I say that with a lot of pride because Riverside, along with most healthcare foundations, we do not take any money off the top of that for operational or overhead. A dollar given is a dollar reinvested. So you can see the difference that the math makes. Let's go back to the prior slide, Mackenzie. because one last note here, I've mentioned these 7 sisters. I'm very proud of the fact that during this last year, these 7 healthcare organizations grouped together and quite literally helped become the wind underneath the wings of the Virginia Department of Health. We had a long history of being flexible, of having information systems in place, having electronic connectivity in place. And so we were able to do a lot of supportive work for the Virginia Department of Health while things began to develop on that front, and to get ready for both the testing and then most recently, thank goodness, the vaccination efforts. All right, let's move ahead 2 slides and continue to dig into a little bit about how does it happen in this country that healthcare has become so dependent on philanthropic gifting. In this, we are not at all different than universities and colleges, another place that is often very dependent on the philanthropic dollar. I like to refer to this as that moment of unintentional, very innocent hypocrisy that each of us goes through. What do I mean by that? Well, first, let's look at ourselves in the mirror as a purchaser of insurance coverage. I can speak personally because I've gone through this recently as an independent player on the healthcare market. As a consumer who is looking to pay for an insurance premium, I can assure you I pass the economic reasonable man test because I look for something that is inexpensive and high value as I can possibly find. I want as little money coming out of my pocket every month to pay for that insurance premium. Remember what I said earlier? That premium, insurance premium, is like the 3rd highest ranked expense that people say they intend to pay. And wisely, we all try to keep it as minimal as we can while still getting the value we want. So as consumers, we are what drives the insurance company, understandably, logically, fairly, to pay to the hospital or to the doctor as little as they can get by with. It's a business model, and quite candidly, it's a logical business model. And yet the same person, me, who is willing or is interested in paying as little as I can, when I flip to the other side, and either I'm the patient or my loved one is the patient, then I want the spaces to be light. I want them to be bright. I want them to be big. I want the technology to be the newest. I want the surgeon to be the best. Kristen, I can assure you, like I did during a period of time when I was caring for a loved one for an extended time in a hospital, probably took advantage of those areas that used to be known as chapels that are now known as areas of spirituality or of reflection. I wanted to be able to go to that space and sit quietly, but yet I can assure you that as the premium payer, as the consumer who buys the insurance, when I'm shopping that insurance, I really don't go into depth to make sure that that insurance premium is going to pay that hospital for that lightness and brightness and openness. For the atrium of a pavilion, or for a beautiful spiritual reflection place, or a garden out in front of the cancer center where I can sit and reflect and calm myself. None of those things are paid for. So here's what we call the mission gap. It's the difference between our aspiration as healthcare providers, where, to use the Riverside mission, I'm a little biased. Quite candidly, if they ever make me queen for a day, I would impose this mission on every healthcare provider in this country. Our mission is that we will care for others as we would care for those we love. That's an extremely high level of ideal. And yet on a day-to-day basis, we are only paid at a level that provides the basics, the operational necessities, and the very objectively measured items. There's a gap there. We call it the mission gap. I contend that as long as the American healthcare system is financed the way that it is, there will be that gap, just like it exists in education. As a parent paying tuition, you're interested in many things, but the truth is you're paying for high value. You're trying to get that dollar outflow down while trying to get the value received up. But yet, as an alumni, you want to build on the excellence that has been provided by that tuition check. We want to see better, bigger, brighter, bolder, and that is the role the philanthropic dollar plays now for those of us who are in healthcare delivery, for those of us who are in academic higher education delivery, quite candidly, in a sense, for those of us who support churches, etc. It's that mission gap, the difference between what we aspire, what we know our loved ones deserve, when you're a family member looking for support, you don't think of those bright spaces and those ICU windows as being extra. You think of those as being necessary to set the kind of environment you want for those that you love. Bill Downey, who's one of the biggest advocates and practitioners of the Riverside mission statement, a couple of years ago now, said, if we made a mistake in wording our mission, the mistake was that perhaps it should have been worded that it is in caring for those we love that we learn how to care for others. And I think he has a point, but at the same time, I don't want to change that mission statement. It's become too much a part of our fiber. So I hope this has helped you understand a little bit about how the environmental reality of healthcare delivery and finance, again, specifically today, I'm talking about those integrated delivery systems that provide a community with everything from the emergency room rescuers through the trauma bays, all the way to the intensive care units. The reality that causes us to be dependent and increasingly dependent on the philanthropic dollar so that we can actually meet the mission of providing the kind of care that you want for those you love. Same situation. You can see why it made so much sense to me to be bold. And by the way, I think today is the first time that it's been recorded so that Adelia there at CNU actually knows for sure that we, boldly went after and took one of her alumni away from her. But we've learned a lot from studying higher institutions of learning or institutions of higher education and how they have helped build on excellence and appeal to those with whom they work philanthropically to go from good to great. I contend after this last year of pandemic concern, trepidation, fear, and the very, very first lights of something that we might someday call victory, I think that increasingly folks around this country are going to recognize that, like academia, like our spiritual locations, churches, synagogues, mosque, etc., healthcare is another one of those pillars of a community where philanthropic dollars, well invested, will matter quite a bit for the long term, I believe. Kristen?
Mackenzie, I think we are ready for the next video.
The foundation is critically important to helping us meet our mission of caring for others as we would care for those we love.
In 1999, executives at Riverside realized the need for a foundation to focus on community partnerships and grants that supported public health and well-being. Newly appointed Riverside CEO Rick Pierce entrusted Caroline Martin to charter and bring the foundation to life, with Debbie Atkinson as executive director and Jerry Brink as the first operational executive.
The literal founding of the Riverside Foundation was in the fall of 1999 when Caroline Martin instigated the project of investigating the formation of a foundation.
And Caroline Martin was very instrumental in helping us continue to focus on how we raise awareness about the foundation.
Mrs. Martin was such a visionary. She has grand ideas of the way things could be, and wasn't afraid to really think out of what was happening today and what could be tomorrow.
There's no one who's more about health and wellness and really thinking long-term about how we really make a difference in people's lives than Caroline Martin. Mr. Brink saw his job well beyond the hospital walls. He saw himself as a community leader and proved that in every way that he lived and worked.
That came Mr. Brink, and he carried on a wonderful tradition of excellence.
He really understands the need for a strong community, and one of those bases for a strong community is a health system that supports the health of the community.
Rick Pierce was the president of the hospital at the time, of the health system at the time, and he, working with Dr. Price, decided we needed to have the foundation.
So one of the areas that Rick Pierce had a tremendous impact on the foundation was being the visionary for the Help Fund.
The inaugural team was completed when Dr. McKinley Price became Foundation Board Chair.
Riverside has always been an important part of the community, and people have always liked to support healthcare causes and healthcare organizations. It was determined that we needed to have a vehicle to be able to help people give to Riverside. Dr. McKinley Price, now the mayor of Newport News, was the first chairman of the Riverside Health System Foundation.
Regretfully, he left our board, but he did step into an extremely important role.
I was able to, I used the word carefully, persuade him to run for mayor. I told him there wasn't much to it, it didn't take much time, and the night he got elected, I pulled him over and I said, come see me tomorrow and I'll tell you the truth about all that, and I did.
He was unmatchable in terms of not only the energy, but the creativity, and usually just a little bit of mischief tied in.
McKinley cares deeply about the community, cares deeply about Riverside.
In 2007, Executive Director Debbie Atkinson recognized that to provide the kind of care we would want for our loved ones, the foundation needed to reshape the conversation. To begin to actively steward donors to contribute in support of Riverside's mission,
Debbie Atkinson is a visionary when it comes to relationship development and understanding philanthropy and how to really develop that.
Debbie was the first to help us as we transitioned more from a gift giving to a gift receiving organization at the foundation, and did a tremendous job.
That same year, in honor of their parents, Debbie and her husband Dexter made the first gift to the newly established Dr. Ellis Cancer Endowment Fund. Gifts from patients and families made in gratitude for the care they received played a significant role in the foundation's transformation.
There is this emphasis on care and really listening to the patient and her or his family members. And I think that distinguishes our physicians.
But the captain of the team, pretty much, the quarterback, is a physician. There are several things to consider when considering effectiveness. One is, does one have the intelligence to do the job? The other is, does one have the heart to do the job?
Dedicated physicians have served as leaders and citizen champions for expanding and improving health services in their communities.
I've been honored to be surrounded by such a great group of physicians.
So I've known Diana for, oh my God, over 30 years.
Diana Lovecchio was an advocate and steward for charitable gifts to Riverside from our corporate partners.
Not only was she running construction, she seemed like she ran everything in the hospital that wasn't medically oriented.
She helped us develop a direct connection with so many of the organizations and companies around not just the peninsula, but all of our regions.
I mean, I think that is like really what she did well. She sold the mission of Riverside and sold the mission of, you know, why it was important to give money back to the foundation so we could continue to do the good work of Riverside.
Because of Diana, valuable resources have been made available for our cancer and hospice patients. Riverside volunteers are vital to the delivery of our mission, helping us to provide care in a very warm and welcoming way.
Our volunteers are the first touch points our community members have as they approach the hospital.
Not only do they provide resources of time and talent, many of them provide philanthropic support.
When they connect to a program, they really want to give back.
It's immeasurable what they contribute both in their time and their treasure.
The Riverside Foundation could not do what it does without great leadership from our board.
Under the leadership of Board Chairman Conway Shield, philanthropic support to Riverside has nearly doubled.
You know, again, Conway's one of those people in the community that rarely says no when asked to serve the community.
He has long been a significant advocate for health care.
When he was asked to step up to the chair of the foundation board, he did so without hesitation.
Conway is fabulous. He knows everybody in the community. He has been involved in so many different boards and organizations.
Conway's efforts will continue to make a significant impact on the care Riverside provides in each of our communities.
There's so many people, many of them here tonight, many of them being recognized tonight, who have made Riverside a great place to work, a great organization for this community, and who have helped the foundation be a part of Riverside's success.
Thank you for helping Riverside to care for others as we would care for those we love.
Mackenzie, we're ready for the next slide. And these videos that you just saw were from our 20th anniversary dinner 2 years ago, as we celebrated the 20+ people and entities that shaped the Riverside Foundation, and their stories really are our story. A quick look at our team here at the Riverside Foundation. Each person here comes with a reason to do this work, a personal reason to do this work, and we're really honored to do so. Mackenzie, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. We can't really talk about the foundation without first stopping to say thank you to our communities who really over the past 12 months have stepped in and stepped up for our healthcare heroes. We talk a lot around here about how finally the world is seeing what we've known all along, that our doctors, our nurses, our frontline workers really are heroes. So the Riverside Foundation, when the pandemic started, jumped in right away to start receiving all of those cloth masks, those meals, and then obviously the donations that came through the door to support our needs during that time. And we're just so grateful. Thank you, Mackenzie. Very quickly, we'll just address, and Faye touched on most of this. So why give to a foundation, a philanthropic foundation at a hospital or a health system? And we do liken this a lot to higher education. The first is, and I call them my 3 Gs. The first is filling the gap between what we should be doing, what our mission requires of us, and what insurance pays for. That leaves a very large gap. Things like transportation to appointments. We have many oncology patients who can't simply get to their appointments. They don't have rides. They can't afford the rides. That's medication that's denied by the insurance company, but the doctor knows that that is exactly what that patient needs. That's even helping with air conditioning during the summer or mortgage payments. That's receiving a call from a hospice nurse saying, I have a patient in hospice currently, their house has been condemned. What can you do? And it's moving that person and their family into a place so that person can die in a place with dignity. It's just day after day, our oncology navigators, who, by the way, are also funded by the foundation, our nurses, our doctors calling us and saying, we have a need, can you step in and help this patient? And then we have what I call good to great. And this is very similar to an education model where you want your university, your alma mater, to be the best it can be. And by the way, greatness also needs support. Once you reach that, you still need to keep it up. But the good to great are those things that are above and beyond everyday care that make Riverside and health systems and hospitals what they are. That's the simulation center that we just built at Riverside Regional Medical Center, a $1.2 million raise from the foundation to build a community simulation center, which is very rare for a community hospital to have a simulation center like this. It's a place where our residents and our doctors and our nurses and even our paramedics can come and train in an environment over and over and over to get down the procedures that they need to do to save lives, but in a safe place. It's an amazing facility. If you would like to see it, we'd love to show it to you. It's things like advanced genetics counseling and getting more genetics testing out through our free clinics and through our family care practices to catch cancer earlier than it's being caught. It's scholarships for our healthcare heroes and workers. We have a College of Health Careers. It's providing those scholarships. Many of our students at the College of Health Careers are first-generation college students. It's advanced memory care supports, snoozelen therapy, which we have in many of our memory care supports. That's a very odd word, but look it up, snoozelen therapy. Therapy that goes above and beyond and tries to mitigate memory care patients having the need to have medication. And so we have that in our memory care units now. We recently received a gift to support a memory care navigator for our Alzheimer's and dementia family and patients, somebody who can be that person that guides them through that journey. And that's a huge step, all through philanthropic dollars. And then finally, gratitude. And gratitude, as I know, it is healing. It's a tangible way to say thank you for life-saving and life-changing care. For me and for many, it's a way to remember someone. Every year I get to make a gift in my dad's memory and in Dr. Spellman's honor, and it is the way that I keep him alive and all of the things that he did. And I get to, really every July when I make my gift to his medical center, it's a way to remember him and to connect to him again. So we here at the Riverside Foundation believe in gratitude and we believe in healing, but we believe in all of this that we've talked to you about. We really are honored to do this work for our communities, our patients, our families, and our communities. We're getting close on time, and Faye and I really did want time for discussion, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Yes.
A really good question come in. So.
Great. Let's go ahead, and Mackenzie would love to take questions. Yes, sure.
Mackenzie, you can, I saw a question pop up related to the vaccination. Question was, how has Riverside been so successful? And I think the rest of it said in the vaccine rollout, if that's what the rest of the words were. If not, Mackenzie, correct me. I can address that a little bit. Not a doctor, nor have I ever even played one on television. However, I can tell you there was two or three key elements. Number one, I alluded to this earlier, and that is that Riverside, like the other 6 of the 7 sisters I was complimenting, already had a magnificent connectivity in place via the software foundation is known as Epic. You probably at home know it as MyChart, that had already established a incredibly necessary link between us and the vast majority of our patients. Connected to that was our ability to rack and stack those patients so that we knew age and situation clinically. And so that was a very important part of why Riverside and other healthcare providers that I alluded to, who incorporate everything from emergency care to ICU care under one umbrella, were able to be quickly and clearly responsive. The second thing that they had, that we, Riverside and others, had going for us is that in healthcare today, to steal a good promo phrase from someone, it's logistics. And so behind the scenes in any successful healthcare system is a logistical supply chain that would possibly blow your mind. It's not fancy, it's not sexy. I mean, it is fancy, it's not sexy, it's not bedside care, but without the logistical support being pre-built and pre-established, we would not have been able to be as successful as we have been. in that vaccine rollout. The third key is, now I'm going to just show hometown pride all over the place, is the makeup of our executive team. Dr. Mike Dacey is now the President and Chief Operating Officer. He works in link with Bill Downey, who is our Chief Executive Officer. The next team player is Dr. Nancy Littlefield, our Chief Nursing Officer. And then you have the money guy, Bill Lawson, our Chief Financial Officer. Those four individuals were locked into harness, thank goodness, at exactly the right moment in our history. Two clinicians, two individuals who thrive on efficiency and effectiveness. Those four individuals were able to bring the team together, focus them using that electronic data system, enable them using that logistics system. And the result, I think, is something that this organization is going to be proud of for the next 100 years. I can't speak of it without tearing up, because it's hard not to be proud to be part of that team. That's the only question I saw, but I see that there's an indicator that there might be others. So Mackenzie, you're going to have to drive.
All right, I'm not seeing anybody raise their hands. If you do have a question you'd like to ask verbally, please raise your hand and we can turn on the mic and camera for you, and they're happy to answer your questions.
Well, we're glad for this time today and have enjoyed it. And as Faye was talking about our vaccine rollout, we've reached over 100,000 vaccines administered, and we're very proud of that. Very proud of that.
Thank all of you for spending the time with us today. You can probably tell that on many elements and many issues around healthcare and healthcare delivery, either or both of us could talk for a long, long time. I have to end by again complimenting the community on its support of healthcare, most notably during this last year. But we both alluded to that simple concept of everyday remarkable that actually goes on here, goes on at Centera, goes on at Boston Coors, MCV, UVA, our sister Inova up north, and our sister in the west of Carillion. Thank you for supporting that. It's an honor to take care of you, and we really will do our best to take care of you just as we would take care of someone we love. I saw a compliment from Patricia McClellan, and thank you.
It's our honor. Well, thank you for having us today. You know, CNU was my first professional home here on the peninsula, and I still have all of my CNU blue in my closet and wear it often here at Riverside. So thank you for having us back today. And I think I saw Jane Sulzberger sign on, and I just have to say how much I love Jane, and of course Mackenzie. Thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you, everyone. If you have questions that you think of later, we are easy to find, and we hope you find us.
All right,
everyone, if you stay well. Keep those masks on, by the way. Keep distancing. The vaccine isn't do it all. I feel like I have to do a paid announcement. Please do your part to stay well, because we do have some very tired clinicians and some very tired support teams, and gosh, do they ever appreciate everything you can do outside of the walls of these delivery systems to help keep the community well. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.